The Weight of Secrets. Chapter 1. The Perfect Life. Sarah Matthews had always believed in fairy tales. At 34, she lived in what everyone considered the perfect suburban dream, a pristine colonial house with white picket fence, 2 beautiful children, and a husband who provided well for their family. From the outside, her life sparkled like a magazine cover. But perfection, she had learned, could be suffocating. Michael, her husband of 12 years, was a successful attorney who worked 16-hour days and came home exhausted, speaking only in grunts about his cases. Their conversations had dwindled to logistics about school pickups, grocery lists, and weekend soccer schedules. The passionate couple, who once stayed up all night talking about their dreams, had become 2 ships passing in a well-decorated hallway. "Mommy, why don't you and Daddy laugh anymore?" Emma, their 8-year-old, had asked one morning over breakfast. Sarah's heart had cracked a little more. Even their children noticed the growing chasm between their parents. Chapter 2. The Spark. It was a rainy Tuesday in October when David Chen walked into the art studio where Sarah taught evening classes. He was enrolled in her Painting for Beginners course, a 40-year-old architect who claimed he needed a creative outlet from designing office buildings. "I haven't held a paintbrush since elementary school," he said with a self-deprecating smile that made Sarah's stomach flutter unexpectedly. David was everything Michael wasn't. Where her husband was rigid and methodical, David was spontaneous and curious. He asked Sarah about her art, really listened to her answers, and remembered details from their conversations. When she mentioned loving Van Gogh's use of color, he brought her a book about the artist's letters to his brother. "I thought you might enjoy this," he said simply, and Sarah felt seen in a way she hadn't experienced in years. Chapter 3. The Crossing. 3 months of innocent flirtation led to coffee after class. Coffee led to lunch meetings disguised as discussions about art technique. Sarah found herself looking forward to Tuesdays with an anticipation that both thrilled and terrified her. "You light up when you talk about painting," David told her one afternoon as they sat in a quiet cafe downtown. "It's beautiful to watch." No one had called her beautiful in years. Michael barely looked up from his phone anymore. The first kiss happened in David's car in the museum parking lot after they'd spent the afternoon wandering through exhibitions. It was soft, tentative, and sent electricity through Sarah's entire body. She pulled away breathless and guilty. "I can't," she whispered. "I'm married." "I know," David said gently. "I'm sorry. I've never felt this way about anyone before." Sarah drove home in a daze, her lips still tingling, her wedding ring feeling heavier than ever. Chapter 4. The Descent. But she didn't stop seeing him. The pull was too strong, the loneliness too deep. Their affair began 3 weeks later in David's downtown apartment, a passionate explosion of everything Sarah had been missing. For 2 hours, she forgot about grocery lists and parent-teacher conferences and the growing silence in her marriage. "I love you," David whispered against her skin, and Sarah's heart soared and shattered simultaneously. "Don't say that," she pleaded, even as she pulled him closer. The guilt was overwhelming, but so was the intoxication of being desired again. Sarah began living a double life with meticulous precision. She created elaborate excuses for her absences, Book clubs, yoga classes, shopping trips with fictitious friends. She became an expert liar, something that horrified and amazed her in equal measure. Chapter 5. The Unraveling. The affair continued for 6 months, a perfect secret that consumed Sarah's every waking moment. She was simultaneously the happiest and most miserable she'd ever been. At home, she played the role of devoted wife and mother while counting hours until she could see David again. Michael seemed oblivious, too buried in his work, to notice his wife's sudden interest in new lingerie or the way she smiled at her phone. But 10-year-old Jake was more observant. "Mom, who keeps texting you?" he asked one evening as Sarah's phone buzzed for the third time during dinner. "Just Aunt Lisa," Sarah lied smoothly, her heart pounding. The close calls became more frequent. A near miss when she saw Michael's colleague at the restaurant where she and David were having lunch. A forgotten receipt in her car for a hotel room. Each incident felt like walking across thin ice, knowing it could crack at any moment. Chapter 6. The Discovery. The end came not with dramatic confrontation, but with quiet devastation. Michael found the hotel receipt on a Saturday morning while cleaning out Sarah's car. He stared at it for long minutes, his lawyer's mind processing the date, a Tuesday when she'd claimed to be at book club, and drawing the inevitable conclusion. When Sarah returned from the grocery store, she found Michael sitting at their kitchen table, the receipt between them like a smoking gun. "We need to talk," he said quietly. Sarah's knees went weak. After months of elaborate deception, her secret was exposed by a crumpled piece of paper she'd forgotten to throw away. "Michael, who is he?" The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah had rehearsed this moment in her mind hundreds of times, but now she could only stare at her husband's face, watching 12 years of marriage crumble in real time. Chapter 7. The Confrontation. "His name is David," Sarah said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael's face went through a series of transformations. Disbelief, hurt anger, and finally, a cold mask of composure that was somehow worse than screaming would have been. "How long?" "6 months." "Do you love him?" The question she'd been avoiding, even in her own mind. Sarah looked at her husband, really looked at him, and saw the man she'd fallen in love with in college now broken by her betrayal. "I don't know," she answered honestly. Michael nodded slowly, as if that answer told him everything he needed to know. "I'll be staying at my brother's for a while," he said, standing up. "We need to figure out what we're going to tell the kids." Chapter 8. The Aftermath. The next few weeks were a blur of difficult conversations and sleepless nights. Sarah told David about the discovery, expecting him to fight for their relationship. Instead, he was understanding, but distant. "Maybe this is for the best," he said. "What we had was beautiful, but it was built on lies. Neither of us could live with that forever." Sarah realized he was right, but the loss of both her marriage and her affair left her utterly alone. The children took the news of their parents' separation with the resilience of youth, but also with questions that pierced Sarah's heart. "Did Daddy do something bad?" Emma asked. "No, sweetheart. Mommy made some mistakes, and now we have to figure out how to fix things." Chapter 9. The Reckoning. Marriage counseling was Michael's condition for attempting reconciliation. Dr. Rodriguez, their therapist, created a safe space for honesty that was both healing and excruciating. Infidelity is often a symptom of deeper problems in a relationship, she explained during their first session. But that doesn't excuse the betrayal. Both partners need to take responsibility for their contributions to the marriage's decline. Michael admitted to neglecting their relationship, burying himself in work to avoid intimacy he no longer knew how to navigate. Sarah faced the full weight of her choices, understanding that her affair wasn't just about loneliness, but about her own fear of confronting problems in her marriage. "I took the coward's way out," she said through tears. "Instead of fighting for us, I ran away with someone else." Chapter 10. The Choice. Rebuilding trust proved harder than either of them anticipated. Some days brought progress, meaningful conversations, small gestures of affection, glimpses of their former connection. Other days brought setbacks. Michael's sudden coldness, when he remembered the betrayal, Sarah's guilt manifesting as defensive anger. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Michael said one evening after a particularly difficult therapy session. "I don't know if I can forgive myself," Sarah replied. They stood at a crossroads: divorce and divide their family, or do the grueling work of rebuilding from ashes. Both options required courage. Neither was sure they possessed. Chapter 11. The Healing. Slowly, painfully, they began to find their way back to each other. It wasn't the same marriage. That had died with the first lie Sarah told. But something new began to grow in its place, built on hard-won honesty and the shared commitment to their children's well-being. Michael learned to express his needs instead of burying them in work. Sarah learned to face problems head-on instead of seeking escape. They rediscovered conversation, laughter, and eventually physical intimacy, though it took months to get there. "We're different people now," Sarah observed one night as they sat on their porch watching the kids play in the yard. "Maybe that's not entirely bad," Michael replied, taking her hand tentatively. Chapter 12. The New Beginning. 2 years later, Sarah still saw David occasionally, unavoidably, in a city their size. They nodded politely like acquaintances, the passion that once consumed them now feeling like something that happened to different people. Her marriage to Michael wasn't perfect. It required daily choice, constant communication, and the ongoing work of two people committed to not repeating past mistakes. But it was real in a way her affair never could have been. "Do you ever regret it?" Emma asked one day, now old enough to understand more about what had happened to their family. Sarah considered the question carefully. The affair had nearly destroyed everything she held dear, but it had also forced her to confront truths about herself and her marriage that needed facing. "I regret the pain I caused," she said finally. "But I learned things about love and commitment that I couldn't have learned any other way. Sometimes we have to lose everything to understand what really matters." Epilogue: The weight lifted. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Sarah and Michael renewed their vows in a small ceremony with just their children present. The words meant more this time, spoken not in naive hope, but in mature understanding of what marriage really required. As they exchanged rings, Sarah thought about the weight of secrets and the freedom that came with truth. Her affair had been a devastating detour, but it had led them to a more honest, more intentional life together. The fairy tale was over, but real love, complicated, challenging, and ultimately more rewarding than any fantasy, had taken its place. The weight of secrets had nearly crushed them, but the weight of truth, though heavy, had made them stronger than they'd ever imagined possible. In the end, Sarah learned that perfection was not only impossible but undesirable. A marriage built on honesty, forgiveness, and daily choice to love was worth more than any picture-perfect facade. The scars remained reminders of how close they'd come to losing everything. But scars, Sarah realized, were also proof of healing, evidence that something broken could be made whole again, different, but stronger than before. Chapter 13. The Shadows Return. 3 years after their renewal ceremony, Sarah thought she had buried the past completely. But ghosts have a way of returning when least expected. She was picking up groceries when she saw David's ex-wife Jennifer in the produce section. They had met only once at a gallery opening before the affair began, but recognition was instant and mutual. "Sarah Matthews," Jennifer said, her voice carrying a mixture of curiosity and something darker. "Jennifer, how are you?" "Divorced, actually. Found out about David's pattern of wandering." Jennifer's smile was sharp as glass. "You weren't his first, you know, or his last." The words hit Sarah like ice water. All those months of believing their connection was special, unique, transformative, reduced to a pattern, a habit, a repeated betrayal. "I'm sorry," Sarah managed. Or are you just sorry you got caught?" Sarah left the store without buying anything, her hands shaking as she gripped the steering wheel. At home, she stared at herself in the bathroom mirror, seeing not the woman who had learned and grown from her mistakes, but the naive fool who had believed she was the exception to a cheater's rule. Chapter 14. The Ripple Effect. That night, Sarah couldn't bring herself to tell Michael about the encounter. She had promised complete honesty, but this felt different. Not a betrayal, but a painful truth that would only hurt them both. But secrets, even small ones, have weight. Over the following weeks, Sarah found herself distant questioning everything about her past choices. Had David ever loved her, or was she simply another conquest? Had her marriage been saved by grace, or by the collapse of an illusion? Michael noticed immediately. 3 years of rebuilding had made them sensitive to each other's moods. "What's wrong?" he asked one evening after the kids were asleep. Sarah looked at her husband, really looked at him. His hair was graying at the temples now, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. The affair had aged them both, but it had also deepened their connection in ways she was still discovering. "I saw David's ex-wife," she said finally. Michael's body tensed slightly, but he didn't pull away. "And she said I wasn't the only one, that he had a pattern." The silence stretched between them like a held breath. "Does that change anything?" Michael asked quietly. "I don't know. Does it?" Chapter 15. The Truth About Love. They talked until dawn, revisiting territory they thought they'd mapped completely. Sarah struggled with feeling simultaneously relieved and foolish. Relieved that David's love hadn't been as real as she'd believed, foolish for not seeing the signs. "Maybe it's better this way," Michael said as the sun began to rise. "If he had been the great love of your life, where would that leave us?" "You are the great love of my life," Sarah said, surprised by the certainty in her voice. "That's what I couldn't see before. I was looking for someone to make me feel special, instead of making our relationship special." "I failed you too," Michael admitted. "I got comfortable lazy. I stopped trying to win you every day." "We both did." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their neighborhood wake up around them. After years of talking through their pain, they had finally reached something resembling peace. Chapter 16. The Next Generation. Emma, now 13, and sharp as her father's legal mind had been asking more pointed questions about their family's history. She was old enough to sense the weight of what had happened, but not old enough to understand it fully. "Mom, can I ask you something?" They were alone in the kitchen, Emma helping with dinner, while Jake played video games upstairs and Michael worked late again, though not as late as he used to. Always. "When you and Dad almost got divorced, was it because you stopped loving each other?" Sarah paused her chopping, considering how much truth a 13-year-old could handle. "We never stopped loving each other," she said carefully, "but we forgot how to show it. And I made a very serious mistake that hurt Dad badly." "What kind of mistake?" "The kind that breaks trust. And trust is the most important thing in any relationship." Emma nodded solemnly. "Is that why you and Dad talk so much now? To keep trust?" "Partly, yes. We learned that we have to keep choosing each other every single day. Love isn't just a feeling. It's a decision you make over and over again." Chapter 17. The Unexpected Test. 5 years post-reconciliation. Their marriage faced a new challenge when Michael's firm offered him a partnership that would require relocating to Seattle. The opportunity was everything he had worked toward professionally, but it would mean uprooting their carefully rebuilt life. "I told them I need to discuss it with my family," Michael said over dinner. "Dad, that's amazing." Jake, now 15, was excited by the prospect of a new city. Emma was less enthusiastic. "What about our friends? Our school?" Sarah felt a familiar anxiety creep up her spine. Change had always been difficult for her, often triggering her impulse to run rather than adapt. But this time was different. This time she had tools. "What do you think?" Michael asked her later when they were alone. "I think," Sarah said slowly, "that 5 years ago this kind of decision would have terrified me. I would have felt like you were choosing your career over our family. And now, I know that you would never make a decision without considering all of us. If you want this partnership, we'll make it work." Michael's smile was worth more than any professional accolade. "I want to discuss it with all of us. As a family, this affects everyone." Chapter 18. The Revelation. During one of their family meetings about the potential move, Jake surprised them all with his maturity. "I know what happened between you guys," he said suddenly. "I'm not stupid. And I know Mom had an affair." Sarah's heart stopped. Emma looked shocked, but not entirely surprised. "Jake," Michael began. "It's okay, Dad. I mean, it wasn't okay when it happened, but you guys fought for our family. A lot of my friends' parents got divorced and just stayed angry. You didn't do that." Sarah felt tears burning her eyes. "I'm so sorry you had to know about that." "I'm not sorry," Jake said firmly. "It taught me that marriage is hard work. When I get married someday, I'll know that loving someone means fighting for them, not giving up when things get difficult." Chapter 19. The New Adventure. They moved to Seattle that summer, embarking on a family adventure that would have been impossible during their dark years. The change was challenging, but bonding, requiring them to rely on each other in ways they hadn't since the children were small. Sarah found a new art studio to teach at one that specialized in art therapy for couples in crisis. Her own experience gave her a unique perspective that helped other struggling relationships. "You really understand," one of her students said after a particularly emotional session. "Most people who give marriage advice have never been where we are." "I've been exactly where you are," Sarah replied, "and I've been on the other side too. Both are survivable if you're willing to do the work." Chapter 20. Full Circle. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Sarah and Michael took a trip to Paris, alone for the first time in years. As they walked along the Seine, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought them here. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't found that receipt?" Michael asked, as if reading her thoughts. "Every day," Sarah admitted. "I think I would have ended the affair eventually, but the guilt was eating me alive. In a strange way, getting caught saved me from myself. It saved us both." They stopped at a bridge and looked out over the water, comfortable in each other's presence, in a way that felt both familiar and hard-won. "I have something to tell you," Michael said. Sarah's heart skipped old reflexes, still sensitive to unexpected revelations. "I've been thinking about stepping back from the partnership track, spending more time with you and the kids while they're still at home." Sarah stared at him. "Michael, you've worked toward this your whole career. And I've learned that career success means nothing if I don't have my family to share it with. I almost lost you once because I prioritized the wrong things. I won't make that mistake again." Epilogue: the continuing story. 10 years after their renewal ceremony, Sarah Matthews could honestly say she was grateful for her mistakes, not because she was glad she had hurt people she loved, but because those mistakes had led to growth she couldn't have achieved any other way. Emma, now in college, often brought boyfriends home who were amazed by her parents' relationship. "They actually talk to each other," she would tell Sarah privately. "Like really talk. It's kind of amazing." Jake, preparing for his senior year of high school, had chosen his girlfriend carefully, applying lessons learned from watching his parents rebuild their marriage. "Mom," he said one evening as they worked in the garden together, "I want you to know that what happened when I was little, it made me a better person. I know what real love looks like because I watched you and Dad choose it every day." Sarah looked at her son, tall now, with his father's serious eyes and her artistic hands, and felt a profound gratitude for the winding path that had brought them all here. Her marriage to Michael wasn't perfect. They still had difficult days, still struggled with communication, sometimes still had to choose each other over and over again. But it was real, honest, and deeper than anything she had imagined possible in those early naive years. The affair would always be part of their story, not the defining chapter, but an important one that had taught them both who they really were and what they were truly capable of, both in terms of causing hurt and creating healing. As she and Michael prepared for bed that night, Sarah caught sight of their reflection in the bedroom mirror. They were older now, marked by experience and time, but they were also more themselves than they had ever been. Individually and together, the weight of secrets had been replaced by the strength of truth. And truth, Sarah had learned, was heavy but sustainable in a way that lies never could be. Their love story wasn't the fairy tale she had once believed in. It was better, messier, more complicated, more human, and ultimately more real than any fantasy could ever be. In the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Chapter 21. The Unexpected Return. 22 years into their marriage, Sarah thought she had seen the last of her past. But life has a way of circling back when you least expect it. She was at the grocery store, the same one where she had encountered Jennifer years before, when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Sarah?" She turned to find David Chen, older now, with silver threading through his dark hair, but unmistakably him. Her heart didn't race as it once had. Instead, She felt a strange detachment, as if looking at a character from a book she had read long ago. "David, hello? You look happy," he said, and there was something wistful in his voice. "I am." The words came easily, honestly. "How are you?" "Divorced. Again." He smiled ruefully. "Turns out I wasn't very good at learning from my mistakes." Sarah felt a profound sadness for him, but not the pull she might have expected. "I'm sorry to hear that. Are you still married to Michael?" "Very much so." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, surrounded by the mundane reality of grocery shopping. Such an ordinary place for such an extraordinary conversation. "I think about you sometimes," David said quietly, "about what we had." "What we had was beautiful," Sarah replied carefully, "but it wasn't real. Not in the way that matters." Chapter 22. The conversation at home. That evening, Sarah told Michael about the encounter without hesitation. Years of rebuilding trust had made transparency their default setting. "How do you feel about seeing him?" Michael asked as they prepared dinner together. Sarah considered the question carefully. "Sad, mostly. For him, for the person I was, then for all the pain we caused, but not stirred up, if that's what you're asking." "It's what I was wondering, yes." Michael's honesty about his insecurities had become one of the foundations of their rebuilt marriage. He no longer pretended to be unaffected by reminders of their crisis. "Michael, look at me." Sarah took his hand's flour, dusting her fingers from the bread she was making. "That man was never my future. He was my escape from not dealing with our problems. You are my choice every single day. Even on the days when I leave my socks on the floor and forget to put the toilet seat down." Sarah laughed. "Especially then. Those are the days when choosing love is most important." Chapter 23. The wedding. Emma's wedding was everything Sarah's own first ceremony had been, full of hope promises and the naive belief that love would be enough. But watching her daughter exchange vows with Marcus, a young man who had proven his character through 3 years of patient courtship, Sarah felt a complex mix of worry and protective anxiety. During the mother-daughter dance, Emma whispered, "Thank you for showing me what real love looks like." "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "You and Dad didn't give up when things got hard. You fought for each other." "That's what I want with Marcus. Not the fairy tale, but the real thing." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. The greatest gift of their painful journey might be the lesson it had taught their children about the difference between love as a feeling and love as a commitment. Chapter 24. The health scare. When Michael collapsed at work during Emma's first year of marriage, Sarah's world tilted on its axis. The heart attack was mild, the doctors assured her, but the wake-up call was profound. "I could have lost you," she whispered as she sat beside his hospital bed, his hand warm in hers. "But you didn't. And you wouldn't have even if the worst had happened. You wouldn't have lost me. Not really." "Don't talk like that. Sarah, listen to me." Michael's voice was stronger than she expected. "What we built together, it's bigger than either of us now. It's in our children, in the people we've helped, in every choice we've made to love instead of run. You couldn't lose that if you tried." The depth of their connection, forged through fire and sustained through choice, had become something almost sacred. Chapter 25. The grandchildren. Jake's twins arrived when Sarah was 58, tiny miracles that brought a new dimension to her understanding of legacy. Holding her granddaughter Lily for the first time, Sarah thought about the generations of love and pain that had led to this moment. "She has your artistic fingers," Michael observed, studying the baby's delicate hands. "And your stubborn chin," Sarah replied, laughing. "God help us all." As they watched their son navigate the overwhelming joy and terror of new parenthood, Sarah reflected on how differently she approached life now. Where once she had sought escape from difficulty, now she leaned into it, trusting that challenges could strengthen rather than destroy. Chapter 26. The Mentor. Sarah's art therapy practice had grown over the years, and she found herself mentoring younger therapists who worked with couples in crisis. One of them, a woman named Lisa, who reminded Sarah painfully of her younger self, was struggling with her own marriage. "I don't know how to fix what's broken," Lisa confided during one of their supervision sessions. "You don't fix a marriage," Sarah replied. "You rebuild it. And rebuilding requires tearing down everything that wasn't authentic in the first place." That sounds terrifying. It is, but the alternative, living a lie, is worse. I speak from experience. Lisa looked up sharply. Sarah rarely mentioned her personal life maintaining professional boundaries, even as she drew on her experience to help others. "You've been where I am. I've been where you are, and I've been where your husband is too. Both sides of betrayal taught me something essential, that real love isn't about never hurting each other. It's about choosing to heal together when hurt happens." Chapter 27. The Anniversary. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Sarah and Michael returned to the place where they had renewed their vows 15 years earlier. The small chapel looked exactly the same, but they were profoundly different people. "If you could go back and change it all," Michael asked as they sat in the same pew where they had made their second set of promises, "would you?" Sarah considered the question she had asked herself countless times over the years. "I would change the pain I caused you, the damage to our children, the months of lies. But I wouldn't change where we ended up, even though it nearly destroyed us. Especially because it nearly destroyed us. We learned what we were made of, both the worst and the best." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching dust motes dance in the colored light streaming through stained glass windows. "I love you more now than I did when we were 22, Michael said finally. "How is that possible?" "Because now I know what that love cost us to build, and I know it was worth every single painful step." Chapter 28. The Circle Closes. At 65, Sarah was diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer. The treatment was aggressive but successful, and during the long months of chemotherapy and recovery, she and Michael faced mortality in a way that put their past crisis into stark perspective. "I wasted so much time being afraid," Sarah said one evening as they walked slowly around their neighborhood, her energy still fragile from treatment. "Afraid of what? Of being honest about what I needed, of asking for what I wanted, of doing the hard work of making our marriage better, instead of looking for someone else to make me feel better." "We both wasted time," Michael replied. "But we found our way back to each other, and we have years ahead of us still." Sarah squeezed his hand. At 67, Michael had retired early to be her primary caregiver during treatment, never once making her feel like a burden. The man who had once buried himself in work now prioritized presence above all else. Chapter 29. The Wisdom Years. As they entered their 70s, Sarah and Michael became the couple that younger relatives came to for advice. Their grandchildren, now teenagers, saw them as the gold standard of committed love. Grandma, Lily, asked one afternoon as they painted together in Sarah's studio, "How did you and Grandpa stay married so long when so many people get divorced?" Sarah paused, her brush loaded with cerulean blue. "We learned that marriage isn't about finding the right person. It's about being the right person every day, even when you don't feel like it. But what if you make a really big mistake?" Sarah's heart clenched, wondering what her granddaughter might be facing. "Then you tell the truth. Take responsibility and work harder than you've ever worked to earn back trust. And if you're very lucky, the person you hurt will choose to rebuild with you." "Did you ever make a big mistake, Grandma?" Sarah met her granddaughter's eyes, seeing Michael's honesty reflected there. "Yes, sweetheart, I did. And it taught me the difference between love that's easy and love that's worth everything." Chapter 30. The final chapter. Michael died peacefully in his sleep at 81, with Sarah holding his hand and their children surrounding the bed. His last words were, "Thank you for choosing me." At his funeral, the church was packed with lives they had touched together, couples they had mentored, students Sarah had taught, colleagues Michael had worked with, and 3 generations of family who had learned about commitment by watching them. Emma delivered the eulogy, speaking about a love that had survived betrayal and been made stronger by the survival. "My parents taught me that love isn't a feeling you fall into," she said, her voice strong despite her tears. "It's a choice you make every single day." They chose each other through good times and terrible ones, through mistakes and forgiveness, through sickness and health. Not just in theory, but in practice. Sarah sat in the front row surrounded by her children and grandchildren, feeling not just grief, but profound gratitude. They had been given 59 years together, more time than many couples ever get, and they had used it well. Epilogue: The Legacy. Sarah lived 5 more years after Michael's death, long enough to see Emma's youngest daughter graduate high school and Jake's son marry his college sweetheart. She spent her final years writing, not the novel she had always planned to write, but a memoir about marriage betrayal, forgiveness, and the daily choice to love. The book, titled The Weight of Secrets, A Marriage Worth Fighting For, became a bestseller and helped countless couples navigate their own crises. In it, she wrote, "I used to believe that true love meant never hurting each other. I learned instead that true love means choosing to heal together when hurt inevitably comes. My affair nearly destroyed my marriage, but our commitment to honesty and growth ultimately made it stronger than I ever imagined possible. We didn't just survive betrayal, we transformed it into deeper understanding, greater compassion, and a love that could weather any storm, because it had already weathered the worst one we could imagine." Sarah died surrounded by family. Her last words an echo of Michael's, "Thank you for choosing me," she whispered to her children. "All of you every day chose to forgive and to love. That was the real miracle." At her funeral, Jake read from her memoir, "Our love story wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in the end, real was so much better than perfect could ever have been." The weight of secrets had nearly destroyed them, but the weight of truth, carried together, had made them immortal, not in life, but in the love they had built, and the lives they had touched, and the legacy they had left behind. Their story lived on in every couple who chose to fight for their marriage instead of walking away, in every person who chose honesty over comfortable lies, and in every family that understood that love is both the most fragile and the most resilient force in the human experience. The end of their story was really just the beginning of its impact on the world.